Welcome to Midnight Paralysis. Enter if you dare.
This was 2018. My wife's birthday was coming up, and she'd really been bugging me about wanting a treadmill. She'd been wanting one for years, but those things are crazy expensive. On a tight budget, the only option that felt reasonable was to get one used. I scrolled on Craigslist for several days, looking for anything that stood out as a good deal, but it was hard to know what was good and what wasn't. But after a few days, I did stumble on one that seemed to be both in good shape and not overpriced. Looked very lightly used. I contacted the guy, who sent me his phone number so we could talk about finding a time to meet up. His name was Terrence. We never called. Everything we discussed was over text. But he didn't seem pushy or weird in any way. Just some guy looking to get rid of a treadmill that his wife also had wanted, but ended up never using. The only minor issue with this Terrence guy was that he seemed to always be working very late hours. He said he did the closing shift at his job, and always got out at 10 p.m. That was a bit late for me, knowing he was already about a 45-minute drive from my place. So we kept going back and forth on plans for me to pick it up, never really setting anything up yet. Until one night, around 8:30, he texted me that he was getting out of work early this night and asked if I was available. At this point, my wife's birthday was just in a few days, so with not much time left, I agreed to just head down there that night. I drove to my brother's place to borrow his pickup truck, then drove out to the address Terrence sent me. Before leaving, I tried doing a quick search of it online to see if there was a street view of the house, just to have an idea of what I was pulling up to. And while there was a Google Street View of the road his house was on, I couldn't actually see his house, or any other houses on the street for that matter. Regardless, I headed down there. I don't live in the biggest town/city. A lot of houses are far out, and so this one also being far away and what you'd consider to be in the middle of nowhere wasn't that unusual. His house was in one of those older neighborhoods that didn't really feel like a neighborhood. There was just one long, winding gravel road through the woods with smaller paths/driveways leading into the trees. My maps didn't even recognize those paths as drivable, and told me I'd reached my destination before even turning down the one Terrence's house was on. I drove a good ways down it. I'd say almost a quarter-mile, before reaching his house. It was massive, for lack of a better word. A huge mansion, settled right in the middle of the trees. One of those old brick-style ones, with pillars on the outside, and vines that climbed up the outer walls. It was not the house I expected to see from a guy selling a used treadmill on Craigslist of all places. I parked and headed up to the front door. I could hear the knocks echo through the whole inside of the home. A minute later, Terrence opened the door. He was a tall but thin man, probably in his early 30s. He said the treadmill was just upstairs in one of the spare bedrooms. He started to lead me inside and up the stairs. The inside of this mansion was probably exactly what you're imagining. Old furniture everywhere, outdated wallpaper, and it even had a musty smell. Not like it was abandoned, though. He clearly lived here. It just had a very strange, almost haunting feeling. I did not like being in there. When we got up the staircase, there was this massive hallway with probably 8 to 10 doors. Some were open, some were closed. As he led me down the hall, I glanced into a few of the open doors, not necessarily looking for anything, just doing it out of habit. When we passed one of the doors on the left of the hallway, sort of in the middle, I caught sight of something really fucking creepy. There was a man sitting on the edge of a large bed, facing the doorway, and just looking at me with a hollow, dead stare. I quickly shifted my eyes away and didn't say anything. Terrence didn't say anything either, showing me into the last door at the very end of the hallway. The only thing in this room was the treadmill. I awkwardly stood in the doorway for a moment, waiting for him to go in, before he patted me on the back and told me to take a look, that I could test it out or do whatever I wanted to make sure it was good for me. I smiled and walked over. Didn't really know what to do, so I just turned it on and made sure it seemed to function like I thought it would. While I heard a soft creaking sound from the hallway, like a door moving. I looked up at Terrence, and he was looking down the hallway, giving this cold, demanding stare. Then he looked back at me, pretending like nothing happened. "So, do you like it?" "Oh, yeah, looks good to me." He said great, and that he was gonna go get something to help us move it downstairs and into my truck. He then hurried away from the room before I could say anything. I heard his footsteps go down the hall and to the first floor. I stayed in the room, not really sure what else to do. A few seconds later, I heard a different set of footsteps. At first, they were soft, walking into the hallway, and then all of a sudden, they sprinted from the other end of the hallway, straight down to the room I was in. But they stopped right before appearing in the doorway. "Hello?" I called out. I knew he was standing right in the hallway, just out of sight. I could hear him breathing. I took a few steps closer to the doorway, and just before I reached it, suddenly the man sprinted back down the hall. I only caught a glimpse of him running into the bedroom and slamming the door shut. I think I mumbled something like, "What the f was that?" under my breath, really unnerved by whatever that was. "Terrence?" I called out his name. It echoed through the entire mansion. The only noises in response were the low thuds and creaks from the old house settling in the wind. I started getting this aching feeling in my gut, telling me not just to leave, but to run. I fought it though, and instead slowly moved down the upper hallway. "Terrence, you still there?" I called out again, with no response. I passed by the door to the room I saw the man run into, but it was silent in there. I couldn't fight the feeling anymore, sensing something was about to go sideways real fast, and ran for the staircase. Right when I got down the first step, I saw Terrence hurrying up from the bottom. When he saw me, he quickly shifted his right hand behind his back and looked at me with wide, guilty eyes. We didn't speak for a second, just looking at each other. "Everything okay, bud?" I was frozen. I didn't know what he was hiding behind him, but it definitely could not be anything to help move the treadmill with, like he had said. He could probably read my face that I knew something was wrong, but I knew I just needed to get past him and out of this house. I was just gonna head out to my truck to grab the cash, if that's alright. Terrence kept his eyes on me, weirdly thinking about it, like he was deciding whether or not to let me. But then, after a few seconds, his face grew into a wide, fake smile, and he said okay. He moved toward the wall, as if to let me walk past him. I paused for a moment, then slowly walked down. I moved past him, feeling his eyes watching me, and anticipating the possibility that something would happen. But I got to the door and hurried to the truck. It was dark, so I didn't notice it at first, but right when I got in and sat down, I could feel the truck leaning to one side, and knew he had slashed the tires. I didn't care. I just pulled out and drove with the flats all the way out of the neighborhood. I did notify the police station, but nothing worth noting really happened. They tried to talk to Terrence, but he refused to answer any questions, and I had no proof of any wrongdoing, or that he was the one that slashed the tires on my brother's truck, so it got nowhere. I find myself genuinely disturbed every time I think about being in that old mansion. I can't figure out what was really going on in there. Something was wrong with that other guy, and I don't know what. I'm not sure if he was in on the whole thing, or if he was actually also a victim. I just really hope nobody else falls for whatever I almost went through.